Good evening. My name is Kendra Phillips, and I am the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Engagement at Hill Learning Center in Durham, North Carolina. For those not familiar with Hill, we are a K-12 educational nonprofit that exists because mainstream instructional practices too often do not serve all students, including those with both diagnosed and undiagnosed learning differences. Our ambitious vision is that all students with learning and attention challenges receive the instruction and support they need, regardless of where they attend school. We pursue this vision through a range of programs to reach students and educators here in Durham and beyond. If you haven't already, I encourage you to visit our website and explore the available resources at hillcenter.org. Through the Community Education Series, we offer free, practical, research-based strategies to help students as well as the parents, teachers, and professionals who support them. This series is made possible through the generosity of our supporters, including our presenting sponsor, the Forest at Duke. The Forest at Duke is a vibrant, not-for-profit continuing care retirement community in Durham, North Carolina. Thank you to the Forest, and thank you all for being here with us this evening. Before introducing our speaker, let me cover a few details. This event is being recorded and will be distributed tomorrow, along with a copy of the slides and a short survey. Please complete the survey. Your feedback is important to us in developing future sessions. All participants are muted, but you can submit questions to the presenter and the Hill team anytime using the chat. We will use these for the Q&A session at the end, so please send them in the chat as soon as you have questions. The presentation will be approximately an hour, and then we will have Q&A. Now, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome Dr. Lucy Hart Paulson. Dr. Paulson is an author and literacy specialist with a mission of bringing research to practice and a speech-language pathologist with experience working with educators and with young children and their families in a wide range of educational settings. Dr. Paulson was an associate professor teaching and conducting research in the areas of language and literacy development and disorders. She provides professional development, blending areas of language and literacy together, resulting in effective, appropriate, and engaging language-based literacy instruction and intervention for all children. Finally, Dr. Paulson is the co-author of LETRS for Early Childhood Educators, second edition, Building Early Literacy and Language Skills, and Good Talking Words, the second edition. So now I'll turn it over to our presenter for this evening, Dr. Lucy Hart Paulson.
Wow. Kendra, thank you so much. I want to just get a thumbs up to see if everything is working. Hope so. All right, thank you for that introduction. And thank you to the Hill Center and Sarah for inviting me to come and share some time with you this evening. And I get to stay around tomorrow and share some things that I have learned across my journey. And tonight, what we're going to do is talk about what's the fuss about phonics and phonemic awareness. You see the connection there? And you know what I like to say, this is kind of a joke that I have recently, but it's probably not so much of a joke. Do you know what phonics is without the PH business, the phonemic business? If you take the PH away, what do you have left over? Onyx. So what we're going to do is just chat about what some of those things are that are related to phonemic awareness, a big focus on phonemic awareness, and then how that creates a very important foundation for phonics. So as Kendra said, I'm an author and I get to do this a lot as a literacy consultant, and I'm a speech and language pathologist by profession. And my journey has been going on for decades and decades and decades and decades and decades. And I spent about 2 decades in public education working with little kids. And that's where I saw a really, really important connection to the way that little friends were learning to say the sounds of the language and then subsequently learning to read them. And those little friends who were coming to see me who taught I did, and you tana amatran what you they ted very well. Did you get that? Right? I knew what to do to help them learn how to say the sounds of the language. And then as I followed them through their early elementary grades, they so often were back in the special education referral process because they were having difficulty learning how to read the sounds of the language. Reading and writing was also a challenge. And I wanted to know so much, a burning question. What could I have done with those little friends when they were with me and in my care that would have made a difference and maybe paving that road to reading and writing a little bit smoother for them? And so it's been a journey of a lot of decades, moving into that 5th decade. And I'm really honored to have an opportunity to share that with you. So I spent 2 decades in schools, and then I had an opportunity to move to higher ed, and I spent about 2 decades there in higher ed, and that was all in the beautiful state of Montana. How many syllables in that? Let's see, Montana. And then 6 years ago, when my first grandchild was born, she happens to live in Central Oregon, and that's where my husband and I got to relocate so that we could be not distance grandparents, but right there watching how she and now her little brother and her cousin are growing up in this realm of developing their oral language and developing their early literacy skills. So I'm in a very happy spot. So thank you for joining this. I have a sense that there might be educators with us. Yes, well, everybody joining is an educator. Some working in a school's kind of setting or an educational-based setting. How about families, parents? Any kids joining? Got some fun things, so you might want to hang around. All right, so, and kids, see those mountains in the background? Those are all volcanoes, just saying. That's a picture from my porch. Okay. In our time together tonight, I want to talk about these 3 things. So I want to describe the interconnected relationship among phonemic awareness, phonics, and how that also relates to spelling. Maybe we could change spelling. Maybe I wonder what that new orthographic connection could be, because spelling really needs to have a PH in it as well. It has a P, but we didn't quite get the spelling. How about that? Okay. Secondly, I want to describe what the developmental sequences are and age expectations for phonics and phonemic awareness. And that also speaks to what we should be expecting for spelling, because in the earliest grades, spelling and phonics should be hand in hand. It's not a reading time and then a writing time, but it's a reading and writing time in the earliest grades, particularly in kindergarten and 1st grade. All right, so we're going to look at that sequence from before children start traditional school at kindergarten, and then we're going to go through the primary grades of what goes on with older students with this notion of phonological awareness when phonics maybe hasn't quite stuck yet. And then third, I want to share some activities or strategies and routines of how we can include phonics elements along with phonological awareness in lots of everyday kind of play routines. And speaking of play routines, let's just have one right now. So in your setting, whether you're in a school or whether you're at home, you can do this activity. How many of you are familiar with Hickety Pickety Bumblebee, this song? And you have a little bit of a bee puppet. I have one right here. You ready? Got a bee puppet. We have a song card. Whenever you have a song, if you have a song card, now what are you introducing? The orthographic representation of the song. It gives us that opportunity to look and embed some phonics kinds of activities within this print. If you're in preschool, you can talk about first sound. Oh, look at that letter. Yeah, I see that letter. Oh, yeah, it's an H. You knew that. And what letter does the letter H, what speech sound does the letter H represent? You know, like in hickety. Okay, so here's a early developing phonological awareness test that you can do in your early childhood settings when you are taking attendance. Hickety pickety bumblebee, please say your name for me. Oh, did you say your name? Oh, I will. Okay. Lucy. Lucy. I'll say my name. I can clap it or I can tap it. Lucy. Wow, how many parts did I have in my name? I had two. Anybody else have two parts in their name? I wonder if there were some of you who had one part. Yep, you just had one tap. I wonder if anybody got to 4 or 5. Alexandria. Oh, cool. And so what did we do with our names when we were engaged in a fun song activity with Hickety Pickety? Taking the most important word to a little friend, their name, and segmenting the syllables in their name. That is the first entry into phonological awareness. Now, I know we hear in a lot of contexts that rhyme is the first phonological awareness skill to develop. How many of you actually think that that matches with your experience? It didn't match with mine. And that was one of the reasons, a big part of my journey in wanting to know more about what the research said. And all of the research says that, yeah, segmenting syllables and blending syllables is a lot easier than rhyming is. We'll chat about some of those sequences. Okay, here's another key point, and I want to make sure that every single one of you, particularly those of you who work in an early childhood setting, early childhood is from infant, toddler, preschool, up through first, second grade. And the two best predictors of reading achievement when children are entering kindergarten, that means that transition from preschool, pre-kindergarten into early kindergarten, and predicting how well students are going to be reading at the end of second grade are these two things. One is phonemic awareness, and particularly what being able to isolate that first sound. So here's my B. What does B start with? Yep, B. Here's a phone. What does phone start with? Did you say yes? Cool. It's not how we spell it, but that's how we say it. So the beginning sound awareness is the capital letters, the best predictor of how well students will be reading 2 years down the road, 2+ years down the road, if they are able to do that skill readily and competently at the beginning of kindergarten. The second best predictive indicator is that introduction to phonics. So you see how phonemic awareness and phonics are so tied together. It's letter knowledge. And at the beginning of kindergarten, here's a really important distinction. I had an opportunity to ask this question recently at a pretty large group of educators. And I said, which is more predictive at the beginning of kindergarten? Letter name knowledge. I'm going to do an N with my finger spelling. Letter name knowledge or letter sound knowledge? Name or sound? So put your hand up. And here's the correct answer. Name knowledge. At the beginning of kindergarten. When you go to the end of kindergarten, then it becomes sound awareness. That's a really important point at this time frame in a young child's life. And it's a point that I see often that gets a little bit confounded out in the field with our educators, because there's information out there that just isn't very accurate. Okay, that is a key point that I want to make sure that if you're writing anything down, and did you know writing something by hand gives you a better memory, better retention for it. All right, so foundation skills, you know this, foundation skills for early reading and writing. There's this very important concept of the alphabetic principle. What are the two primary foundation skills of the alphabetic principle? Oop, there's that PH thing in the middle again. And it has a lot to do with the definition of an alphabet. An alphabet is a series of letters or symbols. We call them letters. They're symbols that represent, oh, here are some symbols. You know that one. You know that one. T, A. So those letters or symbols represent sounds. Ooh, I wonder what this word is. K, a, t. You heard those sounds. And then, oh, they happen to match up with those letters. So the alphabetic principle is when a child has a true developing understanding that they can look at this letter that we call C, and they know that it says and represents, it doesn't say, but it represents or spells the K sound. But sometimes it also represents the S sound. A represents the A sound. That's what we teach in those earliest years. T, that's a little more consistent. It represents the T sound. So young children, preschool into kindergarten, are need to develop a strong awareness of the alphabetic principle. That's what early phonics is. And so when that alphabetic principle is developing, then children are ready to move into more traditional phonics. And you see, a little friend might see a word like this, and they sound it out, k, a, t. And we hope that they're able to blend those sounds together, right? I bet, how many of you have seen this experience where a little kid says, k, a, t? Yeah, and you say, yeah, what's that word? And they say, k, act. What's that word? Act. What are they not getting yet? That important aspect of phonics where you squeeze those sounds together to say, cat. And there it is. And then you have a recognition and an understanding of what you mean when you say that particular syllable, cat. All right, so early, the alphabetic principle is a step into phonics, and it requires both alphabet knowledge and phonemic awareness. You got it. Okay, I want to just share with you an overarching timeline of what I like to call early literacy, when children are becoming aware of what the written language is all about. And I like to use that definition when children are in the throes of learning the alphabet, in the throes of learning how to play with the sounds and syllables of words. And then when they match a sound to a symbol in a meaningful way, that is the transition from early literacy into early reading and writing. That's the definition that I like to use in the LETRS for early childhood educators. Now, I know there are a few people in North Carolina that have been doing LETRS and LETRS for early childhood educators. I hope it's been a really valuable journey for you. So that early reading and writing is when phonics is such an important skill to be taught and is important instructional component in the curriculum. Kids are learning what those letter sound representations are, or phoneme graphing, because it might be more than one letter. It's reading and, what's that other word? Yes, writing. Reading and writing go together, like breathing in and breathing out go together. And then as children have a basic understanding of phonics patterns, developing a sense of orthographically mapping words so that you look at a word and your vision of that word, what it looks like, and your sounding of what that word, those letter patterns are supposed to represent, the sound pattern. And then you are able to shift then to that next phase, that next big phase of reading to learn. All right, so early literacy absolutely is happening in preschool and into kindergarten, and then early reading and writing is kindergarten to about grade 2, and then reading to learn. And it's a continuum. It's not a block step kind of perspective. And we want to make sure we're attending to the children who are in our care, identifying what their skills are, and providing them the opportunity to help them move to the next step, whatever that next step might be. Okay, so I want to just share another illustration that I've created for the interaction between phonological awareness and phonics. All right, and think about these colors. When babies are listening to the language that they're bathed in, they learn to babble the sounds that they are hearing. They are becoming phonologically sensitive to the sounds in the language that they are loved in. And then they figure out where the word boundaries are in that flow of speech that they're hearing, and they learn to say words. So they know in this series of syllables, do you want mama to get you a bottle now? And they know what mama is, and they're learning what bottle is. That is a precursor to phonological awareness, and that's taking place, a really important phonological step that's taking place in that infant toddler time period. And think of all the speech sounds that toddlers are learning to say in the words that they're learning to say, so that their words, as they're getting longer and they're learning to say more words, you can understand them because they're learning more speech sounds. They've become sensitive to what those speech sounds are. Okay, so then preschoolers grow in their language, they grow in their cognition, and now they can intentionally think about words. And that's what the beginning parts or the beginning development of phonological awareness is. So here, think about this as blue. Okay, phonological awareness, we'll think as a color blue. Also, what is going on in those early grades is children are exposed to the letters of the alphabet. They have alphabet songs, they're learning the alphabet books and singing the alphabet song. And there's a big focus in preschool in helping kids learn and recognize what the letter names are, and also exposing them to what the sounds that those letters represent. So let's put letter knowledge as being red, okay? And so when a child has enough phonological awareness development and they have some letter knowledge development, and guess what they do? They put it together, and that becomes did you say alphabetic principle? Yes, and look what color it is, because when you put blue and red together, what color do you get? Purple. Yes. Okay, that is happening. Preschool, kinder is a big, important year that's taking place. It's continuing to develop in first grade. And by the end of first grade, it is expected that the alphabetic principle is in place. You're moving much more deeply into phonics, and the basic level of phonological awareness is in place. Yeah, what happens after you begin to learn how to read, that phonological awareness blue turns a little bit more purple-ish, but still blue. Because when you have the capacity to read, you look at the word cat and you can recognize it really quickly. You have that orthographic, or what orthography or orthographic means is you recognize the way that word looks in print. It's the spelling pattern in print. That is going to facilitate deeper phonemic awareness understanding. So here is an activity that I want you to do. I want you to do this. You have to say it out loud, okay? And I'm going to give you a task. And as you say this task out loud, what I want you to think about is what's going on in your brain? How are you processing this task, okay? So I'm going to have you say a word. Ready? Say the word pat. Switch the first sound to the last and the last sound to the first. And you came up with tap readily. How many of you also visualized P-A-T, T-A-P? Many of you may have been able to do that consciously. I will say either consciously or subconsciously you all did, because you are all literate learners. So here's a quick story. I was working with a 4th grade boy. He had a significant phonological processing difficulty, and I had him do that very task. Say pat, and he said pat. And I said, switch the first sound to the last sound to the first. And he goes like this. Were you giggling? What was he doing? He was visualizing the letters so that then he could say the sound that he knew that letter represented in order to do that task. His phonological processing system, his own phonological awareness skills were not supporting his literacy learning, and it was really a big challenge. And so in an intervention context, remember he's in 4th grade, we needed to build his phonological processing system, and the best way to do that is through phonological and phonemic awareness. You don't leave it at that. You want to attach letters to it, but there is a really important aspect of this isolated phonemic awareness bit of work and it's ramping up that phonologic system so that then you hear the sounds, you play with the sounds in words, and now let's attach those sounds to letter patterns and figure out what those letter patterns are, which is phonics, and then moving into the orthographic mapping, which you want to be really quick. Okay, so the alphabetic principle then turns into phonics, which is full on phonemic awareness and letter knowledge. Blue and red together makes purple. So phonemic awareness will continue to develop, and your orthographic competencies, your orthographic skills are now going to contribute to your phonemic awareness, those more advanced skills. We'll talk about those in a minute. And think about older students. How many of you work with students where it's been a struggle learning how to read and write? The work of Sally and Bennett Shaywitz at Yale University over decades and decades and decades has identified, and we've known this for a long time, that when reading is not going so well, and you look at functional MRI, brain activity, and what's going on in the brain of readers when it's going well, and differences in readers where it's not going well, struggling readers. And there is an element in your brain, it's right back here, it's called the angular gyrus. You say it? Angular gyrus. Build a phonological representation of that word. Say it one more time. Angular gyrus. It's the word form area, and you know what's happening? The visual part back here, where you see the letters, is connecting with the sound part right here. And in people, in students, young students, old students, adults, when reading was not working well, there was no activity within that area of the brain of the angular gyrus. But you know what happened when they did phonics and phonemic based instruction with second and third graders? Made a difference. They learned how to read. They redid their mapping of the brain, and guess what their brain was doing? It had started to wire that part of the brain with good instruction. So is phonics important in our instruction with children? Yes. Is phonemic awareness important? Yes. All right. So in the earliest years, in those preschool years, it is looking at a symbol, and it's the visual aspect of that symbol that provides recognition. And then when children are in this alphabetic principle learning, the sound piece connected to the letter becomes very important. And then when you want to read words, then you have to sound, make a recognition or identify what that sound is, and then connect that sound to the symbol and read the word. When you want to spell it, you have to figure out what the sound is and then connect it to the letter pattern that's going to match that sound. Okay? See if there are any questions. And then all of this work leads to orthographic mapping, which is the newer concept in this discussion of literacy learning. Of when you look at a word and you see it and you recognize it automatically, it's not because you've recognized it by sight. It's because you have seen that word and it is mapped to the sounds that those phonemes or the graphemes represent so quickly it looks like it's automatic. And that's what leads to fluency. Okay, so, oh gosh, let's talk a little faster. Okay, so timelines of phonics development. And this comes from a more generalized discussion of Lynette Aries phases. So in the preschool years, there's a lot of print exposure. Kids are recognizing print by the way that it looks. We expose print to kids, and then they start to make sense of what those things represent. A toddler can recognize STOP when it's in a red octagon. Outside of that red octagon, they're not going to recognize or know what it is. So then preschoolers and young kindergartners are learning the alphabetic principle, making sure that they're learning the letter names and then beginning to attach the sound to some of those letters. And then that's the really important connection in kindergarten. And then that next phase of early reading and writing is when children are learning to sound out words or decode words, and then learning to encode words. Now, some of that decoding and encoding can happen in preschool and certainly in kindergarten, but there's that progression and then the intermix of phonics and phonemic awareness. And then the next phase, when phonics patterns and decoding and encoding simple words is taking place, then children are learning how to read words fluently, and that's what orthographic mapping is. You learn to read and spell accurately and automatically. But what comes first? Accuracy. Accuracy first. Okay, so just a little throw in about what letter learning should be. The optimal benchmark for letter learning is done by, looks like I left off. Oh, I think the citation is under my hands. Let me raise my hand and I'll share. It's Shane Piazza, Yakov Petcher, and Laura Justice in 2012. And they identified that the optimal benchmark for children leaving preschool going into kindergarten is 18. Naming 18 uppercase letter names and 15 lowercase letter names. Now, will some of our little friends entering kindergarten get to that level? No, so there's more work to do in kindergarten. Will some of our children exceed that number? Yeah, it's a target, it's a benchmark for us. Okay, and then we want them to get to that needed level of orthographic mapping with good accuracy and good automaticity. And a definition of orthographic mapping is that permanent storage of written words that builds gradually, and it requires, again, look at those two pieces, phonemic awareness and word level reading skills. And the underlying skills require oral language, phoneme segmentation and blending, proficient phoneme graphing, mapping and correspondences, and proficient phonemic awareness, manipulation tasks. Here's a good example. You see the word W-I-N-D. How are you going to say it? I bet some of you said wind, and then you thought, oh, but wait, it could also be wind. You didn't see those, or you maybe mapped it in your head, so you're visualizing W-I-N-D. But in order to manipulate or change wind to wind, what did you have to do? You had a sound substitution task. You had to use your manipulation skills from a phonemic awareness perspective in order to make that pronunciation difference. So yeah, manipulation tasks are important. Okay, so we expect phoneme blending and segmenting in K1, proficient phoneme grapheme correspondence learning in K1, and then proficient phonemic awareness in second grade and beyond, because that's when phonics skills have been taught and that phonics development is moving forward. Now, one of the really important things to make sure that we are providing for children is they're learning phonics patterns, but you don't want to do that out of, I mean, surely you do it in the, to help children recognize and identify patterns in words, and then you want to put those words into text. That's what reading is all about. And the best way to do that is with decodable books. Decodable books that have words that have been specifically chosen that match the phonics pattern that you have been teaching. And what decodable books do is provide the practice that's needed in order to develop orthographic mapping. So, important connection. So, from a phonological awareness perspective, I talked about phonological sensitivity. Remember what that related to? Speech sound development, when babies are learning to babble and they're learning to say the words in the language that they've been loved in. Because when you say a word, you have figured out where the word boundaries are. It's a subconscious skill set. Babies they're not consciously learning or thinking, oh yeah, I just learned to say a new sound. No, and they sometimes come up with funny words, right? Because they haven't figured out exactly what those word boundaries might be. I had a little friend call this letter a YN, X, Y, and Z. Yeah. Okay, and phonological sensitivity leads to phonological awareness. And the definition I like to use of phonological awareness is it's conscious. It's the conscious ability to play with rhymes, play with syllables, play with phonemes. And so babies are at that phonological sensitivity phase. Preschoolers are still in that phase as they are learning to say more and more and all of the speech sounds of the language of their culture, their heritage language. And then they are consciously learning how to play with syllables and rhymes and generally beginning sounds in words. They might get a little further, but it's not expected in preschool. And then the early graders learn to make rhymes or a string of rhymes and able to segment and blend sounds in simple words into more complex words. And a big piece of it is this word all. Hearing a word and being able to tell you what all the sounds are in that word. Okay, here is a bird's eye view of phonological awareness skills. So before phonological awareness, that's that baby and toddler. Remember what we called that? Phonological sensitivity. And then we move into early phonological awareness. Think about a toddler singing the song Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. How might they sing that? Ding, go, little star. What did they do with twinkle and little? Segmented the syllables. And so syllable blending and segmenting is a really important and valuable skill that is developing in the preschool or toddler into early preschool. And they're also developing a sense of rhyme detection or rhyme matching, where you hear it. Oh, that kind of sounds the same. So not yet expressive, that's coming next, and that's at the basic level of phonological awareness. And look at the grade or age or grade range there, first grade to, or preschool to first grade. And that is when the basic level of phonological awareness should be complete. That learning should be complete. So at the early phase, it's about syllables. At the basic phase, it's about phonemes. And then rhyming moves into rhyme production. Now, this is an interesting one. Rhyme detection, rhyme matching. How's in your experience, does you just get a sense that some kids figure out how rhyme works? That's been my experience. And then kids who are struggling with that, how many of you know older students who are struggling with the literacy learning process who can't rhyme? And what that tells me, it's kind of like the canary in the coal mine. You can't rhyme. That tells me that something is not developed to a level within that child's phonological processing system that is supporting their literacy learning. All right, and then we move into this advanced phonological awareness, and that's what happens when, as a first grader, second grader, third grader, your orthographic skills have developed to a level, and now when you want to manipulate some of those words, figure out what the difference might be between how you would spell ship and how you would spell chip. Oh yeah, I hear the difference between those. And then you match up what the spelling pattern is, because you are substituting the sound. So that's the contribution that phonological awareness provides for orthographic learning, and the contribution that orthographic learning provides for advanced phonological awareness. Okay, I think I'm going to go through these really quickly. Early, basic, advanced. Going to give you just a second. Initial sound isolation. Sound. So where's that going to go? Basic. Syllables. Early. Rhyme production. Expressive. Basic. Sound deletion. High. Advanced. Rhyme matching. Detection. That's early. Segmenting sounds. Phonemes. Blending syllables. Early. Substituting. Advanced. Reversals. Advanced. Blending sounds. Phonemic. Basic. Okay. And I want to share this table with you. This is a table that that is adapted from LETRS, Language Essentials for Teachers of Reading and Spelling for Early Childhood Educators, that Louisa and I had an opportunity to write. Can you imagine? I got to write a book with Louisa Moats. Holy cow. All right, so a phonological awareness, this developmental progression. So we have this big notion of phonological awareness, and within phonological awareness, there's phoneme awareness. Now, phoneme awareness covers rhyme, because rhyme is when you can change phonemes. So we have this skill set or component of blending and segmenting, and we can put those two together. And then we have this notion of rhyme. They are different constructs But absolutely in the research, they've been identified as, oh yes, they are phonological awareness skills. So what is the developmental progression? So first, what children do when they're figuring out what rhyme is, they have to be exposed to rhyme. And there's a lot of rhyme exposure in songs that we play, sing, finger plays, children's books. You think of a children's book right off the top of your head that has a rhyme component to it. How many of you came up with a Dr. Seuss book? Yeah, like the King Kahuna, phonological awareness. All right, so there's exposure, and then they learn how to detect. Oh yeah, yep, those sound the same or those don't sound the same at the end. And then learn to produce, whether it's one word or a string of words. All right, so blending and segmenting. Words by syllables first, then words by single sound. And generally what children do is detect beginning sounds. A little friend like Lucy looked at Lorraine and said, your name sounds just like mine. Detecting, not able to say, what does your name start with? Oh, yep, that's the letter. What sound does that represent? What's the first sound? Maybe not quite there yet, but hearing that sameness. And so children generally learn to detect the first sound in words. And then in a CVC word, first sound, what comes next? You know this. The final sound. The hardest one is that one that is in the middle. Okay, so detection and then identification. That's what onset is. Identification. And so you are now able to, Lucy, what's the first sound in your name? It starts with the oh, with that initial sound first and then final sounds. And when you're able to do that, then you move to the next level of words by sounds, where you have a simple CVC word like house or fish, and then you are able to segment the sounds in those words. And when is that expected to be completely developed? According to our Common Core standards or state standards, they're all a lot the same. And appropriately so, it is the end of kindergarten. And then by the end of first grade, children should be able to isolate the sounds in words that have a consonant blend, like stop, where the consonant blend is at the beginning, or the consonant blend is at the end, like in the word fast. Okay, and then we move to manipulations. And that is being able to add a sound or a syllable into a word, delete a sound or syllable, substitute a sound or syllable. And important to manipulations in the journey of learning to read, it needs to be proficient, which means it should be pretty automatic. If you have to think about it, it reduces your accuracy, it reduces your automaticity, and it impacts your fluency. So let me add a few layers to this. We have early, way over on that left-hand side. We have basic in the middle, and we have advanced on the right-hand side. And then we have preschool in that earliest to basic. And then we have K1, which is basic and moving into advanced. And then first grade into the rest of the grades, moving into that advanced level. And now here's another really important layer. We have exposure in preschool. And what we learned a long time ago in the National Reading Panel is that all, say it, all children in kindergarten and first grade should be taught phonemic awareness. All. And then when that's instruction, that's our tier 1 stuff. Now, when that doesn't stick, and it often doesn't stick for our children who may later be diagnosed as having dyslexia, some kind of reading challenge. And often, remember what we talked about? The kernel of reading difficulty is at a phoneme level, because phonemes help to inform morphemes, which help to inform vocabulary, which help to inform how you pronounce things. Everything comes down to that phoneme level. And so in the instruction, children don't get to that level of automaticity with basic, and then their decoding skills and encoding skills are a challenge and a difficulty for them because they are not figuring out that decoding. Then we move to an intervention. Do all children need intervention? No, only the children who have not acquired those skills. And that's a really important point. Okay, so in preschool, phonological stuff is about perception. And then when it becomes phonological awareness, it's conscious. So babies, toddlers are not consciously aware that they're learning to say all these sounds. They just kind of do it. Their brains are wired to be phonologically sensitive to the language that they're exposed to. And then as children, as I mentioned, as they grow in their language development and their cognition, they can be consciously aware of playing with sounds and syllables within words. So I hope that makes or connects with a lot of what you already know and understand. Oh, that slide I should have said before. So let's talk about some real quick sequences of development for how rhyming grows. So 2 to 3-year-old children are in that exposure level, and they're beginning to say the words that rhyme in the book, the finger plays and the rhyming books that they're exposed to. Children at that preschool level are figuring out how to match rhymes, listening to it and saying, yeah, those do, or they don't. They also are in the early stages of learning to produce words that rhyme. And then children transitioning out of preschool, pre-K, going into kindergarten, should be able to produce a string of words that rhyme. Coat, goat, bus, and just recognizing which ones do rhyme, which ones don't rhyme, like okay, coat, goat. What's another word that can rhyme with coat and goat? How many can you come up with? Okay, so let's shift to blending and segmenting. Blending is a synthesis, putting it together, and it's absolutely critical for decoding. Analysis is what happens when you segment, you analyze the sounds in syllables in words. It's really important. Phoneme analysis is absolutely critical for orthographic learning. You are spelling words, so you have to hear a word. Let's see, what are the sounds in that word? And then what's the letter pattern that's going to represent that sound? And then it also leads to rapid sight word recognition, leading to that orthographic mapping skill that is so critical for fluency building. And so we have this linguistic hierarchy where how many of you are familiar with this hierarchy in some kind of phonological awareness program that you have been using? So we have words in a sentence, and then we're able to identify the syllables in a word. And then we move to the next step where there's identify the initial sound in a word, and then identify all the sounds in a single syllable word. And at that top step of this hierarchy, that is the top of and the end of the basic level of phonological awareness. Now, words in a sentence is actually a phonological sensitivity skill, figuring out word boundaries. And then all the rest of them, so early phonological awareness at syllables, but initial sound and phonemes are also phonological awareness, but more specifically, they're basic phonological phonemic awareness skills. Okay, matching up. All right, so really quickly, identify on the linguistic hierarchy which level, syllables, initial sound, or individual sounds, or at the phoneme level. These pictures, this is one of my favorite activities in helping kids build phonological and phonemic awareness. It's taking pictures and cutting them into their constituent parts. So this one would be in the dinosaur, my syllable bag. How about this one? Oh, whoops, nope, that would be the letter. What's the first sound? If. Initial sound, rest of the word. Ish. Oh, I think I have these. Yeah. If, ish. Did you say CVC, individual phonemes? Apple. Syllables. Swing. Initial sound. Did you notice I didn't say onset? Because what's the onset of swing? Sw. What's the first sound? S. It's different. And so saying initial sound or first sound is so much more consistent. Okay, kangaroo. Kangaroo, syllables. Watch. First sound. Egg. Okay. Phew. Okay, I'm going to go through this. So I think How are your own phonological phonemic awareness skills? That's a good activity to do. When we look at how children are developing blending and segmenting skills, syllable level at that earliest level, initial sound, and then individual sounds, and then being able to blend more complex words as well as segment simple syllable words. Blending is an easier task when you get to the phoneme level than segmenting is. And segmenting is that best predictor. Here we are, right here at this second row for segmenting, that best predictor of how well a child entering kindergarten is going to be reading at the end of second grade by their ability to identify and tell you what the initial sound is in words. It's also what alliteration is, being able to match or identify. We talked about that a little earlier. Okay, so when should children be able to blend and segment syllables? Age range, 3 to 4. Match rhymes, preschool, 3 to 5. Identify initial sounds, tell you what they are, 4 to 5 years. Rhyme production, 4 to 5. Sound segmenting of single syllable words, kindergarten, that's 5 to 6. Sound deletion, that's the first grade skill and beyond. Okay. Phew. That was the big piece of the overview, some developmental sequences, connections between phonological and phonemic awareness. So let's try some fun things that we can do to motivate children or modify, well, think about activities that we can do across the day that are fun, which is going to be motivating. And then I also want to talk about how you can modify activities so that you're going to meet children where they are, meet their learning needs. Okay, so foundational skills that children need when they want to learn about phonological awareness is they have to have an understanding, and they have to have some developing oral language. I also want to point out that for children who are learning English as another language, if they have developed a phonological or phonemic awareness skill in their heritage language, in their home language, that skill will transfer to another language. So if they're able to segment words by syllable in their Spanish speaker, and then they are learning to say words in English that are multisyllabic, they can also segment the syllables in those words that they're learning in English. Okay, so another foundation skill is one-to-one correspondence. Following directions, gotta know what the direction is to be able to complete a task. Directionality. Many of you are very focused on making sure when you are presenting any kind of information to children, and phonological awareness can be that as well, that we start on our right-hand side and we progress to the left from our orientation, because for our children, it is that left to right directionality that we want them to be so familiar with. All right, the other piece that is so important is to be aware of the production of what speech sounds are and very clearly articulating those. So here's what Tier 1 instruction should look like for kids in preschool. So in phonological awareness, certainly want to be able to practice and play with rhyming words. You want to blend and segment words, and you want to blend and segment initial sounds. We surely can expose children to blending and segmenting all of the sounds in simple words, but we want them to be learning to do that initial sound. And then from a phonics and word recognition perspective, children are learning letter names. They are beginning to learn to connect a few sounds to those letters, sounds that those letters represent, but letter name knowledge is much more robust in the preschool years than letter sound knowledge is. But children are going to learn what they're taught. Okay, and a lot of print knowledge. When you move into Tier 1 instruction, move now into kindergarten, you're going to do the same thing, still focusing on rhyme. Let's play with rhyme. It's fun. It also is a manipulation task. So it helps children understand and know how you can switch beginning sounds in words, attend to ending parts of words, and know how to manipulate them. You want to identify whether children can blend and segment syllables, but then move on. You do not want to spend a lot of time on syllables when children are in that alphabetic principle learning context. And so the big focus in kinder and first grade should be on sounds, on phonemes. So segmenting individual phonemes in single words, and then creating new words by manipulating the phonemes. Oh, guess what? That's kind of what rhyme is. If I said, tell me a word that rhymes with coat, you have to manipulate that word because you have to remove the k. You have to come up with a new phoneme. Oh, let's see. How about don't? Ooh, do I know what that word means? Nope, I don't, but I came up with a rhyming word. And then from a phonics perspective, you know what's going on. Demonstrating letter sound knowledge, consonants, the main sound that the consonant represents, and then the short vowel sound. And you know the reason for short vowel sounds is because so many of our single syllable words come from the Anglo-Saxon language influence of English, and more of those words are closed syllables, and so the vowel sounds are short. Okay, decoding simple CVC words, reading common high frequency words, and most high frequency words have a phonological connection to it. We also have to add spelling CVC words. Okay, in first grade, now you're counting, blending, and segmenting single syllable words, and also including single syllable words that have consonant clusters. Creating new words by manipulating individual phonemes in single syllable words. There's that phonemic awareness piece, manipulation, and then all these skills within phonics and word recognition. I also want to say we need to add the spelling piece because it's not just about phonics by itself, but it's word recognition and spelling. It's the encoding and decoding. Do those sound pretty familiar to you? That list? Okay, so what can you do when a child is having difficulty with a phonological or phonemic awareness task? So how about with rhyme? When a child is not able to match words that rhyme, what you can do is intentionally point out what rhyming is. Oh yeah, did you hear that? Those sound the same at the end. Lots and lots of exposure. You can have children imitate you. Say coat, boat. Your turn. Coat, boat. Watch what my mouth is doing. Coat, boat. Oh, did you see that? It was different at the beginning, but it was the same at the end. Provide a choice. Does boat rhyme with coat, or does boat rhyme with bus? Oh, yeah. Boat, coat. Mouth cues, and then listening devices. How many of you have whisper phones? I love the PVC ones best because what you can do, you take it apart. You got two elbows. You have about a 3-inch piece of pipe. You can put it together, but you can manipulate it so that I can say bulldozer, and then it's kind of a drive-by. Or if you're ready, I can give it to you, and now you can say that same word. You've heard me say it to you like this, okay? Your teacher say it to you, and now you can say it yourself. And so what do we do with our little friends who are getting it and helping them go to the next step in their learning? You go to the next step in the hierarchy and provide more and more experiences to go deeper and deeper. So rhyming, a couple of rhyme activities. Let's see where we're at here. A couple of rhyme activities. If we have the nursery rhymes that we do. Nursery rhymes are still so fun. Hickory, dickory, dock, sock, block. So we do hickory, dickory, dock. The mouse ran up the clock, right? Okay, so you can make a song card or an activity that goes along with it, and then cards that go along. So this is a little harder to see in our little Zoom squares. So I have some flying in here. Let's try this one. How does this work? Hickory, dickory, dock. The mouse ran up the lock. Let's try it. Dock, lock. Does that rhyme? Yes. Hickory, dickory, dock. The mouse ran up the tree. Let's try it. Dock, tree. You say it? Does that rhyme? No. So you have a series of those so that children are playing with more than just hickory, dickory, dock and clock. Okay. Is that an early, basic, or advanced? Are they saying, are they detecting? Are they producing? Detecting. Okay. The hungry thing. How many of you remember this book? It's decades old. There are many of you who were not even born when this book was written. And what the hungry thing does, though, he comes to town and he has a sign around his neck that says, feed me. And he wants to eat schman cakes. Schman cakes? And the townspeople tried to figure out what it is. Well, schmancakes sound like fancakes, sound like pancakes. And if kids aren't able to get it, then we move it into a lower level where, let's see, schmancakes, pancakes, schmancakes, soup. Which one sounds the same at the end? So when you're having kids say schmancakes, pancakes, what is that? Basic. But when you modify it, you can make it go back to early by providing a choice. Okay, the other thing that you can do with that is change the directions that you use. Oh, kids, not yet, but maybe not in North Carolina so much, but I know where I live, particularly when I lived in Montana, you had to go outside, but you had to put on your potent pittance first. Oh, wait, no, it's not a potent, it's a pote. So manipulating the words, fun, playful, phonological awareness, opportunities throughout the day. Here is one that I love where you can make star rhymes with your Ellison machine. And then on the back of them, you can have a little fishbowl, and during a sponge time activity when children are lining up, or even in a full circle or small group. Oh, let's see. Name a number that rhymes with kicks. And you say 6. Name an animal. There's one. Name an animal that rhymes with mitten. And you say kitten. So colors, numbers, animals, food, rhyme, buildings. Those are all elements of things that we can do to help just puts it into a language context of categories, another important strategy, but embedding rhyme now, early, basic, or advanced. It's production, but it has a layer of language to it, which adds to the richness of the activity. Okay, so you can take attendance with rhyming names, the hungry words changing your directions. So many things that I know you have in your rhyme toolboxes, and I hope these are a few more that you can add. Okay, how about segmenting and blending? So here are some overall strategies that we want to include in our blending and segmenting instruction. You want to include a motion or a gesture. So you want what I like to use my arm. I start on my right arm at my wrist when I am segmenting syllables, because I can say hippopotamus. And by the time you get over to your other shoulder, those are about the longest words that we have in English. And so children they right away get to know this one-to-one correspondence of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Know that syllables are easier than words. Familiar words are generally easier. You want to say, when you are segmenting a word for children to blend, you want to say the syllables that are in about 1 second pauses. And this pacing helps. The gesture helps. So big, more gross motor on your arm, and then tapping your fingers for phonemes. And so when we need to make the task more challenging, we can spread that pause to a longer pause. It taxes your phonological memory more, or to make it easier so that children can be successful, you can make the pause shorter. So lots of things. Making sure that we segment the sounds in their purest form. So you can give me a thumbs up or not, okay? K, a, t. And I hope you're all going like this. No, it's k, a, t. And we know, as we've talked about, beginning sounds are the easiest, followed by final sounds, followed by those internal sounds, and consonant blends are harder. Okay, so when we think about those, here we go. Kangaroo or platypus, more familiar words. Which one is going to be a better choice? Kangaroo. How about these ones? When you want to segment words, top or house? House or top. And house is going to be easier at the beginning because those sounds you can stretch out for a longer time. Segmenting, kind or kid? And I bet you said kid. Rhyming, cat or Jeff? Yeah, there are lots of words in the cat family. Cat, bat, sat, rat, rat, right. You can come up with a whole bunch of them. But Jeff, so many. Okay, so same kinds of things for blending and segmenting and how to make those tasks easier. And using a listening device is so, so valuable. This is a good tier 1. When you have students who are beyond tier 1 and they're now out of instruction and moving into intervention, then you want to get some kind of sound enhancer, so an amplified listener. Ask your speech and language pathologist, and that person can help you figure out how to get one and what to do. I used to say, oh, the one from Radio Shack was so good, but we know what happened to Radio Shack. And then how do you make the task more challenging? You just go to the next level. So we did hickety pickety bumblebee, and that's basic or early, excuse me, because it's syllables. Who's here today? Lucy, Lucy. Who's here today? Sarah, Sarah. You can bounce on the beginning sound in your name. There's that really important skill. That is basic. And then you can move it to the next level, taking attendance by saying, oh, let's see, we're in Raleigh, Durham. We're in Durham. We've been learning about the letter D. We've been saying what the letter D sound represents. So who's here today? Lucy. You can say it. Doocy. Say your name by switching the beginning sound. Yeah, did it come up pretty funny? You don't want to do that if you're working on the letter F and the sound that F represents, and you have a little boy named Tucker or Chuck in your room. Don't go there. That's advanced. Okay, so sound bags where you have a bag of stuff that has multi-syllables in it so that you can segment the syllables. You can also do the beginning sound in those objects as well. Or a sound bag where you have single syllable objects and you can identify the initial sound, or you can identify individual sounds in them. Segmenting and blending. So there can move it from early to basic. You might be able to create an opportunity for advance. And I said this before, but this is my favorite activity, where you have a picture that you cut up. I have a screw driver. It fits in the tool category, not the beverage category. Screw driver. And look at how visual that is. Blend it together. Segment the parts at a syllable level. You can do it in categories or like vehicles or animals. You can also make picture puzzles with the beginning sound, rest of the word, goose. And then you can make picture puzzles where you take words and you cut them apart into individual sound. Sh, p, g. Now, let me have a really big caveat here. In preschool, I have the letters on the cards, because if you are Frank and you are 4 and you get that picture of fish and you're pulling the f away from the ish and you see that letter F and you think, that's in my name, that's a great exposure. Put letters with your phonological awareness activities when children are in the development of learning that skill. In the instruction. When a child has moved beyond the developmental expectation and it's not developing for them, do not, here's this big note, do not put the letters on for older students. Because what will happen, just like my friend who did, right? He had to switch the letters. His phonemic awareness was not developed to a point to able to support his literacy learning. And he needed to build those stronger phonemic awareness skills without the letters. In the lessons, though, that we did a short period of time on phonemic awareness. And then, 5 to 10 minutes phonemic awareness instruction. In 5 minutes instruction, 5 to 10 or more in intervention, and then move into a connection for those letters to the sounds to letters. So you do eventually, in a short period of time, connect it, but there's really important difference in and the distinction of it. Okay, syllables, Elkonin boxes, air, row, triangle, diamond, Phonemes, ooh, you're familiar with Alconen boxes. Say it, tap it, write it. Oh, here's a word bit. Let's identify what the sounds are. B, it. Now let's write the letters for those sounds. F, it, sh. Let's write the letters. And then a word chaining activity. This is what we do when children are learning. And a great one to do, an important one to do, notice no letters. Those are just there for us to see and help us know what to do. If you're doing this activity with a little friend, they just have chips, not seeing the letters. Okay, here's tap. Let's make tap. T, app. Now change tap to top. What do we have to do? T, ooh, ah. But to change that one. Now we have top, t, up. Change top to hop. What do we have to do? Oh, that one. So now we have hop. We have to change it. Change hop to hot. Now what do we have to do? Hot. So another connecting this. Here's my ABCI chart. This is one that I just had easily, which for little kids, it is singing the alphabet song. It's in the pattern of the alphabet song. But for older kids, when you're helping them figure out rhyme and word manipulations, let's take the word cats. Oh, there it is. And if you just go through cat, bat, cat, dat. I circled the vowels so you can just skip them. Fat, gat, hat, jat. So if we were to do the same thing with ob, we would have bob, cob, dob, fob, gob, hob, job, cob, lob, not, mob, no. Just practice, 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 practice building that routine. So a lot of blending and segmenting routines. All of these are on the handout that will be available for you tomorrow. I hope that these match up with a lot of things that you are already doing and giving you a few more of things that you can do to stretch those things even further. And here is a really important piece. When students who have not established well-developed basic phonemic awareness skills by the end of first grade, and their literacy skills are struggling, learning to read and spell, you want to make sure you have a really good phonological processing assessment to figure out what's going on. And the sooner we do that, the easier it is going to be for us to help those children develop the foundation skills that they need so that they can continue on in that learning to read and write process. If phonemic awareness skills are underdeveloped, again, the activities should not include letters. There's a portion of a lesson plan that is phonemic awareness strictly, and then you connect letters to the phoneme patterns. That's what reading and spelling is all about. But you want to make sure you have time to spend in some very specific, isolated conversation. So how do we do on our learning objectives? Describing the interconnected relationship among phonemic awareness, phonics, and spelling, and some developmental sequences, age expectations, and then how we can include phonological awareness and wordplay and connect that to the letter stuff, the alphabet stuff that is so connected to the alphabetic principle and learning about phonics and spelling. So thank you. Now I'm interested in hearing what questions you have and conversations about anything that I shared, or questions that you'd like to just pose for us that you've been pondering.
Thanks so much, Lucy. Let me give you a few of the questions that have come in, and we'll start there. I can monitor the chat if you all have questions and you want to pop them in now. Go right ahead. Can you talk a little bit about how working memory hinders progress in phonemic awareness?
What? What was that you said? Okay, so there are three big component skills to this notion of phonological processing. One is phonological awareness. One is phonological naming. And the third one is phonological working memory. And of those three, we can assess phonological awareness. Let me ask you this. Can we assess phonological awareness? I just answered it. Oh, that was the I do. Let's do the we do. Can you assess naming? Yeah, we do that a lot. And there are a lot of really valuable tools that are out there, like Acadians, where you are seeing how many letters you can name in a minute. How many common pictures when you're 4 or 5 and you haven't figured out all those letters yet? How many pictures can you name in a minute? And then the other piece is how many segments in a word or how many numbers can you remember in your phonological working memory? A good task is say this word, Gallipodob. And can you match what those phonemes are and then be able to produce it? And that is a connection to phonological processing. Now, we can assess phonological naming and we can assess phonological working memory. But there's no research. Actually, what the research does say to us is that we don't teach it. It's one of those indicator skills of how things are growing and developing. It's kind of like going to the doctor and checks your pulse. Finds out that your pulse is not where you want it to be. You don't go home and work on your pulse. You go home and work on other things that are going to influence your pulse. And what the research does identify, and Ron Jensen did some of this work in a work, oh gosh, decades ago, in working and building children's phonemic awareness, phonological and phonemic awareness skills can contribute to developing better word retrieval skills and phonological working memory skills. So in my mind, it's kind of like that phonological awareness is the grease that just makes things smooth.
Yeah. Yeah. So we can expect it to take a little bit longer, but they'll get there. You mentioned early childhood, but would this be the same progression for older students who are struggling? In other words, we still need to tend to this, right?
Okay. So that has been a big conversation recently. Should you do syllables with older students? And I'm gonna share with you a couple things. I'll share with you what my opinion is, and I'll share with you how I like to frame that piece. So think about developmental milestones with a baby. A baby generally learns to roll over, sit, what comes next, crawl, and then walk. Can a baby learn how to walk without crawling? Yeah. And so that is the same thing with phonological awareness. It is not a lockstep progression.
Okay.
It is a developmental trend. And so when you have an older student who's struggling with the literacy process and you want them to figure out what the phoneme grapheme connections are, it's about the phoneme. But when you also know you have an older student, here's my clinical and anecdotal experience, and I think this is also what David Kilpatrick speaks to a lot. Clinically and anecdotally, I worked with a lot of students who are struggling with the literacy learning process, and their phonological processing skills were really challenged. And so we could work to build their phonological awareness skills, and we did work at the syllable level. Didn't spend very much time on it because the syllable level doesn't contribute to decoding and encoding at that basic level of phonics in kindergarten and first grade. But you move into multi-syllabic words. Oh, what was that word? Syllable. You have to have a sense of syllableness when you want to read words that are longer. And so when you consciously point out to students that, whoa, how many syllables are there in that word? It helps raise their awareness of what word structures are and tune into the sound structures within the syllable patterns of those words. And when I am working with a student in an intervention perspective, I want to know what their syllable segmenting and blending skill development is. If they haven't, you don't need to spend any more time on it. And I think that's a big key point too. If a student is able to do a task, that skill development has been there so they can complete a task, move on.
So let me ask you a question then. In thinking about preschool students, and hi, Kate Shaw, when thinking about preschool students, is there any appropriate time to begin intervention at preschool? In other words, are there some things I could be seeing that make me go, oh, I want to pull this child aside and really hit this some more?
Yep. Children who call you teacher, teacher, teacher all year long because they can't remember your name. A lot of it has to do with their word retrieval, word finding. So when you see kids who call a chair a sit-down thing, or they're looking at a zebra and calling it a tiger, now it might be a vocabulary thing and they haven't quite learned that word yet, but they saw the stripes and they thought, oh yeah, tiger, when they really know what a zebra is. So children who have those word substitutions, that's a really big red flag. And we can identify that in children as young as 3. That's the biggest red flag. Some oral language pieces, when children are not learning the structures of oral language from an articulation perspective, they have highly unintelligible speech. It lets you know their phonologic system is not developing in a rate or in a more typical manner. Or children who are not able to pronounce multisyllabic words.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, like other little friends are. Those are all elements that we can identify when kids are little. Some of the biggest indicators that I used when I was in a clinical practice, I wanted to know what the ear infection rate was. Did that little friend have a history of ear infections when they were little? During that speech sensitivity time period? Because if they were listening to language that sounded like this because they had a lot of gunk in their middle ear, they were not hearing the crispness of what speech sounds were, and but and dut and gut and cut all sound the same, and so they're fuzzy. Mm-hmm. I also want to know, when I get into that clinical intervention perspective, I want to make sure I have a developed relationship with the family in doing a developmental history and identifying if there's another family member who has also struggled with the reading process, because the heritability is really strong.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a student who really struggled in 4th and 5th grade with vowels in his spelling, and it turned out he literally was still having an ear problem. And once that was clear, all of a sudden and ah took on a whole new meaning for him. Mm-hmm. So that was really interesting. Can you go back and clarify? Hi, Courtney. Can you go back and clarify onset rhyme versus initial sound? I want you to clarify, because I want to know. Are we taking onset rhyme and just let's put that over here and not use that particular language?
That's my mission. If you want to join my bandwagon, you can. Okay. So let's go through these 4 things. Okay. And think about what the initial sound is and what the onset is. Okay. So there are 4 different word patterns at the beginning of English words. 4 different letter patterns, word pattern, phoneme patterns. Okay. So we have words that have an initial consonant, like rain. What's the first sound in rain? Say it out loud, everybody.
R.
And what is the onset in rain? R. Those are the same. Okay. Now let's take another word pattern. What, the word train. What is the first sound in the word train? What is the onset in the word train? Tr. You have taken 2 phonemes and combined them together. Mm-hmm. Now, here's another word pattern in English. And in English, you can have a word that begins with 3 consonants. So how about the word strain? Okay, what's the initial sound? S. And what is the onset? Str. Not the same. Okay, how about the word an? What is the initial sound? Mm-hmm. Ah. What is the onset? If you said ah, it's a first sound, because there is no onset in the word ah. And I have seen more than one program, a number of phonological awareness programs, where there's this sense that you have to take words that have 2 consonants together at the beginning, and that's an intermediate step between syllables and initial sounds. And it's not. It's giving children bad information.
Yeah, I have seen a lot of people use the phonemic awareness umbrella.
Yes.
As a symbol, and I see onset rhyme listed underneath there. And I thought about that when you were talking, and I thought, I wonder if what I'm hearing her say is what I think I'm hearing her say.
Right. We don't need to use the term onset. You can use initial sound, beginning sound, initial sound. because that's always going to be accurate. The other word that we don't need to use is alliteration. And I know in an early childhood context, alliteration is often combined with rhyme. And you ask any early childhood educator what children's perception is or what their response is when you have an activity that includes initial sound or first sound and rhymes. And yeah, you have alliteration and rhymes in the same activity. It confuses the heck out of those little friends because they're different. I mean, it was done with good intention. Oh, wow, we're focusing on the ends of words with rhyme and focusing on the beginnings of words with alliteration. Kids don't know that. They're not at that meta-linguistic level to be able to think about that in that kind of context. Yeah, so, and alliteration, we borrowed that term from the literary field. It's a way that you speak or a way that you write that focuses on a particular pattern. So, yeah.
I got a question for you. If I'm wondering where can I get a hold of just a wealth of activities that I can do with my students for phonemic awareness, can you talk to me about a great resource for that? And I would imagine you probably know several. But what can I go? What's my go-to?
I think the best go-to if you don't have access to some good phonemic awareness activities is the Florida Center for Reading Research and their activities. So they have a VPK, V stands for volunteer, and they have a whole lot of vetted. That would be another reason for having a VPK. They're vetted activities for preschool. They also have some for the early elementary grades as well. Another resource is Reading Rockets. Lots of good ones. I'd stay away from Teachers Pay Teachers because they may look really cute, but they may not be developed. You need to have a deep understanding of the linguistic structure of phonetics, not phonics, but phonetics and word patterns when you want to put together a phonological awareness program. I've seen programs where they're working on initial sounds and the word is queen. And the program says, what's the first sound in the onset? They use onset, which in this case it's correct, but the target is the first sound. What's the first sound in the word queen? And they say, qua. Oh, no, no, no. What's the first sound in queen? The second sound is what. I've also seen words where the word is spelled F-O-X. What's the final sound in that word? Now you're working on final sounds. What's the final sound? No, no, no. That's two phonemes. And so there's a lot that goes into it. And so when you have vetted activities, it's going to be better. So I included a lot. I did have a publication that has now sunsetted. I'm working on another one. That included a lot of those activities. So, and I have one right here. So it's called Building Early Literacy and Language Skills. Skills affectionately. There's a ton of activities and it's been around for a while and I wouldn't be surprised that you have some on your shelf somewhere. So big yellow book.
One of the things, when I was in the resource room, I had a student who really struggled. And I felt like it was working memory to keep the sounds in order long enough and so I started actually just using common household sounds to have them name, toilet flushing, door closing, somebody knocking on the door, just really trying to get those and keep that order together.
How did that work?
It worked really well for this particular student. And it was sort of in the moment. And I thought, okay, well, let me see what I can do them, like put this in order. And there was a great, it was a CD at the time, but I have since found it online. That you can actually just get these sounds anyway.
Mine was a cassette. Mine was a cassette.
Okay, well, we'll be back at 8-track if we don't stop soon. All right. Lucy, there are no other questions in the chat and you have been absolutely amazing tonight. I could listen to you for a long time. I'm excited about your workshop here at Hill tomorrow, talking about the connection between what you talked about today and written language. So I'm super excited about that.
Writing. Yes, it's all so interconnected. They're all ingredients. And if you want to have really good cookies, you have to have good ingredients and you have to have them put into the order that they need to be made with. And you have to have the right quality and the right quantity.
Yeah.
get really good cookies. And if you have a really important ingredient that's not there,
Mhm.
your cookies are not going to turn out very good.
Yep, it makes all the
Thank
difference.
you. Thank you for those of you who joined tonight. Thank you for what it is that you do, your dedication and your commitment to wanting to know more. And I'm really honored. I'm humbled to have had this opportunity to share this time with you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Lucy.